Most people have at least tried at some point in their lives to learn a new language. Here's a typical scenario. You're going abroad in a few months. So you've started making flashcards and you're memorizing the most important phrases. Like, where is the closest McDonald's? Could I have a double cheeseburger? Or could you give me some ketchup with these sushis? But once you're there, you can't remember anything. It's like you never learned anything at all. Well, it's not just you. It's the way you study. Yes, learning a language past the age of 12 is more difficult. The study methods that we were taught in school and that most adults use are out of date by more than a century. Actually, I was just like most people, trying to memorize words through vocabulary lists and going through textbooks. But then one day, I discovered something called spaced repetition. Spaced repetition has changed the way I approach language learning. In fact, I think this is the most efficient way of learning foreign languages. I'm Louis Lin, and today I'll show you how to learn a language using spaced repetition.
Memory and forgetting. And let me begin with a little story.
At its very core, spaced repetition is about forgetting. More precisely, it's about the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve is a concept created by the psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus in the late 19th century. This curve represents the rate at which information is forgotten. The curve goes down considerably very soon after you first learn about a concept. Just think about it. So, most of what you learn in school is quickly forgotten in the following days. That is, unless you review the information. In this case, the curve goes back up, and then you remember the information for much longer. So, in order to never forget the information, you need to plan reviews at certain intervals. In other words, you have to do spaced repetitions.
Traditional spaced repetition systems.
Here's a very basic system based on spaced repetition. You create a new flashcard for each word that you want to learn. Instead of reviewing these flashcards on random dates, you indicate on the card how well you remembered it the last time using a number from 0 to 5. Then you review each card based on the number you wrote down the last time. 0 means that you completely forgot the word, so you need to review it the following day. 5 means that you remember the word perfectly. You need to review it in a few months. The system is in theory fairly simple, but there is a big issue. In order to truly become fluent in a foreign language, you need to learn thousands of new words. Imagine having to track the progress of thousands of flashcards manually and having to update them on your calendar. This basic system just doesn't scale. Believe me, I tried it. In 2016, I decided to start learning Japanese, and I knew that Japanese was going to be harder than Italian, which I spoke on a daily basis with my friends. And this is where my quest started. I embarked on a quest to find the most effective language learning strategies. I spent hours and hours researching and testing on myself. I also started doing spaced repetition. The scientific literature I found said that recalling words was superior to simply recognizing them. I was trying to find the best way to learn a language using spaced repetition. So I started creating flashcards with Japanese words, and I spent more than 1 hour every day trying to recall everything. But I wanted faster results, so I decided I would try to learn entire sentences and try to recall them. This method was actually effective, but extremely difficult, and I burned out in a few months. And this is a key point in my story. I try a new way of doing spaced repetition that seems more effective, and I end up burning out.
Which I think, because it's relaxed.
I've spent my fair share of time researching and studying using spaced repetition. And here are a few of my humble recommendations. Recommendation number 1, use an SRS. Spaced repetition systems, or SRS, are software tools that make spaced repetition easy. Using a computer, you can create flashcards that are then automatically rescheduled using an algorithm. There are a few good SRS out there. My first recommendation is a piece of software called Anki. There is no doubt that Anki is for advanced language learners. It's very flexible and very powerful, and it's also free. I've used Anki for years and I'm very satisfied. Unfortunately, it is very confusing to a lot of users. The second SRS I'm going to recommend is called Polyglot Lab. Full disclosure, I developed Polyglot Lab, so it's my own website. Polyglot Lab is a free SRS that allows you to create flashcards based on content that you find interesting. It has two advantages over Anki. First, it's much easier to use. There are no technical settings, so you can focus 100% of your time on learning. Second, creating flashcards is extremely easy. You just upload your article in your target language, click on words that you don't know, and then click on a button and your flashcard is ready. The last SRS I would recommend is Glossika. Glossika isn't exactly like other SRS. Glossika is focused on speaking. I've actually used it in the past and I thought it was really effective. If you want an SRS that you can use on the go and that focuses mostly on speaking, then Glossika may be a good choice. Glossika is currently doing a discount, so check the link in the description to take advantage of it.
Look, I guess what I'm trying to say is you're going to spend thousands and thousands of hours trying to learn Japanese. So if you don't find a right balance between something that is effective and interesting at the same time, you're not going to succeed like 80% of everyone that's ever started to learn a language.
Let's move on to my second recommendation. Review your flashcards once a day. Now, this is actually very difficult. Your reviews should not take more than 30 minutes in my opinion. This is because doing something daily usually is pretty hard. So here's the trap with most spaced repetition systems. At some point, it's going to feel very overwhelming, especially if you're adding a lot of new cards every day. Your study sessions are going to be about 75% reviewing and 25% learning new words and phrases. Now, I know that at the beginning, a lot of people are going to be tempted to actually add a lot of new words every day. And that's fine at the beginning because you don't have a lot of reviews because you're just starting out. But the thing is, the more cards you add, the more reviews you're going to get in the future. And the number of cards just compounds and increases exponentially, and you're going to be overwhelmed. I would say that creating 5 new flashcards a day is a minimum, and 10 is ideal. For the hardcore language learners out there, you can go from 20 to 30 cards every day, but remember that you're going to have to spend probably more than an hour every day on just reviews. It's very, very important that you review your flashcards every day. Make it a daily thing. Okay, now let's move on to my third and last recommendation. Make your own flashcards. Now, it doesn't really matter what SRS you're going to use, whether you use Anki, Polyglot Lab, or Glossika. You're going to have at your disposal hundreds of pre-made flashcard decks for every language. For example, if you're using Anki, there are decks on the internet that you can use with the 5,000 most frequent used words in Korean, for example, or Japanese. And it's really tempting to just use those decks so that you have the cards already ready for you. In fact, this was my first approach when I started learning Japanese. I downloaded a deck of pre-made flashcards with Japanese, the 6,000 most common words. And truth of the matter is, it is actually an efficient way to go about learning, but only at the beginning. If you really want to be fluent, as I said, the name of the game is consistency. Unfortunately, if you're studying using pre-made flashcards, usually the sentences on these flashcards are so boring and bland that there's no way you're going to continue just studying this on a daily basis in the long term. So you may see some pretty good results in the beginning, but then in the long term, it's not sustainable.
I hope you learned something new in this video. If that's the case, click the subscribe button below. You just have to click the button below this video. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.